The air in the opulent Manhattan penthouse was thick enough to cut with a diamond knife on my 34th birthday. It was supposed to be a celebration, but the crystal chandeliers only highlighted the furtive glances and smug smiles of my family, the very people I'd trusted implicitly. They sat, nibbling on gourmet canapés, exchanging knowing looks until my mother, Eleanor, began to speak. Her voice, sweet as honey, held a truth that turned my stomach to ice. "Darling, perhaps it's time you knew. Your sister, Vivian, and your husband, David." My heart seized. Mother's unfinished sentence hung in the air like a cold blade. I scanned the table. My father, Richard, maintained his usual placid demeanor, but his eyes darted away from mine with an unsettling quickness. My younger brother, Michael, was fixed on his phone, a faint, unreadable smirk playing on his lips. Then my gaze settled on Vivian and David. They sat side by side, not overtly close, yet an invisible thread seemed to hum between them. Vivian, my perfect older sister, always my role model, subtly touched David's arm, a fleeting gesture, but one charged with an intimacy that prickled my skin. David, the man I loved and trusted, leaned his head slightly towards her, as if privy to a secret. Their eyes met, a brief flicker of electricity passing between them that I couldn't ignore. My mother continued, her voice dripping with feigned sorrow. "It's a deep connection, my dear. Sometimes these things simply happen. We must be strong and navigate this difficult period together." Deep connection? The words echoed in my mind like thunder. My stomach clenched. I looked at Vivian and David again. That subtle touch, that fleeting glance. Suddenly, all the small, overlooked signs, the details I'd dismissed as trivial, flooded my mind, forming a searing, undeniable image. David and I had been through a rough patch lately, burdened by his work pressures and our own minor disagreements. I'd confided in Vivian, seeking solace and support from the sister I adored. She had always been there, listening and offering advice that now felt chillingly disingenuous. But now those comforting words, those reassuring hugs, seemed to carry an entirely different, sinister meaning. A poised woman in a sharp black pantsuit approached our table. She paused beside me and quietly spoke. "Excuse me for interrupting, Mrs. Sarah Thompson," I stammered, my throat tight. "I'm Ava Ramirez and Associates. I'm authorized to represent Mrs. Thompson. It appears this evening's festivities are about to take an unexpected turn. My apologies for the disruption." A thick, suffocating silence descended upon the room. The false smiles vanished, replaced by faces etched with worry and confusion. My birthday dinner, which had started awkwardly, was now the unwitting stage for a drama I never asked for. Yet deep within me, a small spark of doubt and resolve had ignited. Their carefully constructed performance was about to crumble. It all began with a familiar scent, a fragrance that should have been exclusively mine. It was a Friday evening, after a grueling week at work. David arrived home later than usual. He stepped into our bedroom, loosened his tie, and gave my forehead a fleeting kiss as I read in bed. The kiss was rushed and detached, devoid of the passion and tenderness that had once defined us. As he headed into the bathroom, I caught a strange scent lingering on his shirt. It was the delicate yet distinct jasmine fragrance, Vivian's signature perfume. A wave of unease rippled through me, but I quickly pushed it away. Vivian was a frequent visitor. It wasn't unusual for David to accidentally pick up a faint trace of her scent. But these accidental occurrences began to multiply. A cream silk scarf, Vivian's favorite color, tumbled out of David's gym bag. A vague text message on his phone, "Last night was amazing," followed by a kiss emoji from an unfamiliar number that he quickly deleted when I walked into the room. I desperately tried to reassure myself, searching for any logical explanation for these anomalies. David was under immense work pressure. Perhaps he was just stressed and acting out of character. Vivian was my sister. She would never betray me. We had shared countless secrets, countless memories. However, one evening, as we sat together on the sofa watching TV, I noticed something I hadn't before. David leaned slightly towards Vivian as she recounted a humorous anecdote, and his hand brushed against her thigh. It was a mere touch, fleeting, but it carried a warmth, an intimacy I'd never witnessed between him and my sister. Vivian didn't flinch. Instead, she subtly smiled and continued her story as if nothing had happened. That sight was a dagger to my heart. Suddenly, all the accidents, all the small ignored signs rushed back, connecting to form a clear and agonizing picture. The perfume, the scarf, the cryptic text, and now the furtive, loaded touch. A terrible suspicion began to gnaw at my mind. That night, sleep eluded me. Images of David and Vivian together haunted my thoughts. I tried to banish the dark ideas, but they relentlessly returned, tormenting me. I knew I had to do something to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. My gut screamed that something was wrong, and I could no longer live in this suffocating uncertainty. The next morning, I confronted David, trying to keep my voice steady, though it trembled with a mix of anger and desperate hope. I noticed Vivian's perfume on your shirt last night, David, and I saw the text from that strange number. He froze, a flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly replaced by feigned surprise. Perfume? What are you talking about, Sarah? It must have been from the Uber driver. You know how those air fresheners are. He laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. And a strange number? You're going through my phone now, Sarah? Seriously? Work has been crazy. I'm exhausted and you're spinning out over nothing. Paranoid. It was the familiar chorus. I knew this song. I'd heard it before when I'd questioned other minor inconsistencies in our life. It was a well-rehearsed script designed to make me doubt myself. Later, I called Vivian, my voice tight with a mix of pleading and accusation. Vivian, has anything been going on with you and David? Oh, Sarah, she sighed into the phone, the sound itself a judgment. You're spiraling again. You always do this. Remember last year when you were convinced David was cheating because he worked late a few nights? He was just closing a big deal. She sounded weary, as if tolerating a difficult child. You are stressed, darling. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Evans again. He helped you so much with your anxiety. Dr. Evans, my therapist, the one they always trotted out when I dared to question their narratives. My mother chimed in during a subsequent call. Sarah, darling, you know we love you, but you've always been a bit sensitive. You see betrayal where there is none. David adores you. Vivian is your sister. You're creating drama, and it's not fair to anyone, especially yourself. My father Richard joined the chorus. Your mother's right, sweetheart. You're working too hard. You sound tired. Let it go before you make a real problem out of nothing.
Paranoid, sensitive, stressed, unhinged. It was a coordinated attack, a relentless barrage of gaslighting. They weren't listening to my concerns. They were diagnosing me, fitting my fears into a prefabricated narrative of Sarah the unstable one. They made me question my own mind, my own memories, my own perception of reality, until I felt utterly broken. For a while, damn it, it worked. I began to doubt myself. Maybe Vivian was right. Maybe it was just some random scent, a misread text. My gut, which had never failed me in my career as a forensic accountant, was at war with the carefully constructed family narrative. Vivian is the perfect daughter, David is the loyal husband, Sarah is the emotional, overthinking one. But the gnawing feeling persisted. It was a splinter in my mind, festering. So, I did the only thing I knew how to do when faced with chaos. I started to gather data. I began to build a case. I bought a simple black moleskin notebook and a fine-tipped pen. That night, after David was asleep, or pretending to be, I sat in my home office and opened it to the first clean page. The act of writing it down, of giving form to my suspicions, was a small act of defiance. March 3rd. David returns home late. Faint scent of jasmine perfume on his shirt. Vivian's signature scent. Claims it was an Uber air freshener. Note his avoidance of eye contact. March 10th. David seen with Vivian at the coffee shop during his claimed client meeting. Noted a lingering hand touch on her arm as they parted ways. March 15th. David's phone. Deleted text message from an unknown number. Can't wait for next time. XOXO. Deleted quickly. Vivian's new number given to me last week ends in the same sequence. Each entry was a brick, meticulously placed. I was building a wall of facts to protect myself from their storm of manipulation. The gaslighting became a family project. At the next family dinner at my parents' house, I was quiet, observing. It was like watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. I watched how Vivian and David meticulously avoided making eye contact. I watched how my mother would skillfully and smoothly steer any conversation away from their recent coincidental meetings if it got too close to specifics. "You've been quiet tonight, Sarah," my father said, passing the mashed potatoes. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "Just tired," I replied, my voice flat. My mother pounced on the opening, her eyes shining with fake concern. "Still not sleeping well, honey? Your father and I are worried about you. You really should talk to Dr. Evans again. He helped you so much last time." She was twisting that period of vulnerability into a lifelong diagnosis, a weapon to be used against me whenever I stepped out of line. "Maybe you should consider going back on something for a little while, just to level you out. You were doing so well before." The implication was clear. My clarity was the problem. My suspicions were a symptom of my illness. My sanity was the thing in question. I looked at David, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, anything, to defend me. He just looked down at his plate, pushing a single green bean around with his fork. The picture of innocence. He was a silent, complicit partner in my character assassination. Later that evening, I made an excuse to use the upstairs bathroom. Vivian's handbag was sitting on the marble counter, slightly open. I had never gone through her things before. It felt like a fundamental violation of trust. But standing there in the cold, quiet bathroom, I realized trust had already been violated. I was just the last one to know. My hands trembled, but I reached inside. My fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a hotel receipt. The Serenity Suites in Aspen, Colorado. 2 nights, 1 king bed. The date was from 3 weeks ago, the same weekend David had told me he was on a solo fishing trip with his college friends in Wyoming, and Vivian had claimed she was attending a women's leadership retreat in Utah. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the receipt, my heart hammering against my ribs. The flash fell like a gunshot in the silent bathroom. I quickly put the receipt back, straightened her bag, and splashed cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked pale, haunted, but her eyes were sharp and clear. I wasn't crazy, and I had the proof. On the drive home, I pulled over. I couldn't go home with David, not yet. I scrolled through my contacts and found the one person I knew wouldn't try to diagnose me, my best friend, Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. "What's up, Sarah? You sound like hell." My voice came out as a croak. "I think Vivian is sleeping with David." There was a pregnant pause on the other end of the line, but it wasn't a pause of disbelief. It was the pause of a friend processing grim information. "Okay," Marcus finally said, his voice steady as a rock. "What's the evidence?" I told him everything. The scent, the hidden texts, the family's gaslighting, and finally the hotel receipt. "That's a smoking gun, Sarah," he said. "What are you going to do?" I don't know," I admitted, my voice breaking for the first time. They're all against me. They'll find a way to explain it away. They'll say I'm making it up. Forget them, Marcus said, his voice hard as steel. They don't matter. What matters is the truth. You need more than a hotel receipt. You need something they can't spin, something irrefutable. You need to build a fortress of facts around you, high enough they can't climb over it. Get it all and call me when you do. I'm here. I hung up the phone. A single tear of rage and gratitude rolled down my cheek. The war in my head was over. My instincts had won. And now a new war was about to begin. I put the car in drive and headed home. The black moleskin notebook lay on the passenger seat beside me. It had plenty of empty pages left, and I was going to fill every single one. The confrontation with David was a calculated disaster. Logically, I knew what the outcome would be, but some foolish, hopeful part of my heart had to try. I had to give him one last chance to be the man I married, not the stranger who was sleeping with my sister. I waited until the next evening when the quiet of the house felt oppressive. I sat him down on the living room couch, the same couch where we'd once binge-watched shows and planned a future that now felt like a fantasy. I didn't shout, I didn't raise my voice, I simply slid my phone across the coffee table. The crystal-clear photo of the Serenity Suites receipt glowing on the screen. "Can you explain this, David?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. His eyes flickered to the screen. For a split second, I saw it. Pure, undiluted panic. His mask of composure slipped and I saw the guilt, the fear, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a performance that deserved an Academy Award. His face crumpled, his eyes welled up, and the tears started to fall right on cue.
"You went through my things?" he sobbed, his voice thick with manufactured betrayal. "I cannot believe you, Sarah. This is what I'm talking about. Your paranoia, your jealousy, it's suffocating me." "Just answer the question, David," I said, my patience shredding with every fake tear he shed. "Were you in Aspen with my sister?" "No," he shrieked, jumping to his feet. "It was a guy's trip. I told you. My God, you are being insane. You're twisting everything, making up these crazy conspiracies because you can't handle your own issues. I have been working so hard to try and fix things with us, to be patient with your moods, and you throw this insanity at me?" He was a master. He took my discovery, my proof, and reframed it as a symptom of my own sickness. He wasn't the liar. I was the paranoid one. He wasn't the cheater. I was the suffocating wife. "You're sick, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper as he delivered the final blow. "You need professional help. I can't live like this anymore." He stormed out of the room, slamming the bedroom door behind him with a definitive crack. I was left alone in the echoing silence, the damning evidence glowing on my phone. He hadn't just lied. He'd weaponized my pain and tried to destroy me with it. That was the moment the last shred of love I had for him died. It wasn't a quiet death. It was a violent, painful execution. And in its place, something cold and hard began to grow. There was nothing left to save. There was only justice to be had. I called Marcus the next morning. My voice was different. The pleading, uncertain tone from our last call was gone. He denied everything, I said flatly. Called me sick. "Of course he did," Marcus said, his voice grim. "Liars lie, especially when they're cornered. So what's the next move? You can't keep living in that house with him, Sarah. It's poison." "I'm not leaving my house," I said, a cold resolve hardening in my gut. "I paid for it. I'm not the one who broke our vows. I need something they can't deny, something undeniable, something legal." "I know a woman," Marcus said after a beat. "She's not cheap and she's not gentle, but she gets results. Her name is Eva Ramirez, ex-FBI, now runs a private investigations firm, specializes in high-asset infidelity cases, the really messy ones." "Give me her number," I said without hesitation. Meeting Eva was like walking into a different world. Her office wasn't in a fancy high-rise. It was in a nondescript brick building in a part of town that was all warehouses and auto body shops. The office itself was sparse, clean, and smelled of stale coffee and industrial-strength cleaning supplies. Eva herself was a tall, broad-shouldered woman in her 50s with a sharp, intelligent gaze that seemed to pierce right through you. Her voice was like gravel being churned in a cement mixer, and her handshake could crush walnuts. I laid my black notebook on her scarred wooden desk. I showed her the photos. I told her the entire story, from the jasmine scent to David's performance the night before. I didn't embellish, I just gave her the facts, accountant style. She listened without a single interruption, her face a stony mask. When she was done, she picked up the notebook, flipping through the pages with a thick thumb. "Smart," she grunted, the first word she'd spoken in 10 minutes, keeping a log. Most people wait till it's a 5-alarm dumpster fire. They come to me with feelings. I can't do anything with feelings. I need data. She closed the notebook and pushed it back across the desk to me. "This is a good start, but it's not enough for a court of law. It's circumstantial." "What do you need?" I asked, leaning forward. "I need their digital and physical footprints, phone records, GPS data from their cars, credit card statements, hotel surveillance footage. I need to build a timeline so airtight they can't breathe." She leaned back in her creaking chair. "This kind of work takes time and money. My retainer is $50,000. My stomach dropped. It was a huge number. It would require me to liquidate a significant portion of my personal investment portfolio. It was a massive risk, a huge bet on myself. I didn't even hesitate. I looked her straight in the eye. "When can you start?" She saw the look in my eyes, and a flicker of something that might have been respect passed over her stern features. "I've already started," she said. She slid a contract and a pen across the desk. That week was one of the longest of my life. I moved into the guest room. David and I became ghosts in our own home, communicating only through texts about bills and mail. On the outside, I was a machine. I went to work. I hit the gym. I called my parents and told them David and I were working through things and that I was getting some perspective. I played the part of the beautiful, if troubled wife and daughter. I let them think they were winning. Inside, I was a wreck, a constant churning storm of anger, grief, and anxiety. The only thing that kept me anchored was the thought of Eva, my own personal bulldog, out there methodically hunting for the truth. During that week of waiting, I got a strange message on a secure messaging app. It was from my cousin, Jessica. She was younger than me, a bright kid who just started a job in the compliance department at the same investment bank that David worked at. It was a risky move for her to contact me. The message read, "Hey Sarah, weird question, and please don't mention I asked. Is everything okay with David's joint finances? Something weird is happening with some of his accounts under management. Small-scale stuff, but it's flagging our internal systems. Looks like he's moving money around in a way that avoids reporting thresholds. Just be careful." I messaged her back instantly. "Can't talk right now, but thank you. That means more than you know. Please be careful yourself." Exactly 1 week after our first meeting, Eva called me. Her voice was grim. "My office now." When I arrived, Eva had a thick manila folder on her desk. She didn't say a word. She just opened it and slid 6 glossy 8x10 photographs across the desk, one by one, like a dealer laying out a losing hand. The first was of David and Vivian checking into a hotel lobby. It wasn't the one in Aspen. This was a different one, a chic, expensive boutique hotel in Napa Valley. The second was of them holding hands in the hotel hallway, her head resting on David's shoulder in the elevator, her eyes closed in contentment. The fourth, him kissing her neck as they waited for the elevator doors to open. His hand was possessively on her lower back. The images were crystal clear, obviously taken with a long-range lens from across the street. The timestamp on the bottom corner of the photos was from June 17th, our wedding anniversary, the weekend David had claimed to be at a mandatory company retreat, the weekend Vivian had told me she was at a yoga spot with her girlfriends to recenter herself. I felt the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. I had known, but seeing it, seeing the casual intimacy, the stolen moments of affection, all in high resolution, time-stamped color, was like being stabbed and then having the knife twisted. "There's more," Eva said. Her voice was flat. She turned her computer monitor towards me. It was a spreadsheet, and my blood ran cold. It was a detailed analysis of a joint home equity line of credit that David and I had, a line of credit I had forgotten we even had.
He's been siphoning money from it for the past 6 months, small amounts at first, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, never enough to trigger a bank alert. It adds up. He pointed to a total at the bottom of the screen. $62,400.
Where did it go? I whispered. My voice, my money, my house's equity. Eva clicked a few keys. A business license application appeared on the screen for a new high-end women's clothing boutique in a trendy part of the city. The owner's name was listed as Vivian Thompson. The $62,000 had been her startup capital. He had stolen my money to fund my sister's dream business, the one she told me she was financing with a small business loan she'd gotten all on her own. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the arms of the chair. But Eva still wasn't finished. "This is the part you're not going to like," she said, her gravelly voice softening for the first time, a sign of how bad the next part was. She pressed play on an audio file. It was a phone call, a call she legally obtained through a warrant related to the financial investigation. "Just need to keep her compliant for a little while longer," a woman's voice said. It was my mother, Eleanor. My own mother's voice, clear as day. "She's getting suspicious again. She can't find out about the trust fund, not now." Richard agrees. "Once David's promotion is finalized and Vivian's business is stable, we can figure out how to manage Sarah. She's emotional. She'll get over it. She always does." Trust fund? What the hell was she talking about? "Your maternal grandmother, God rest her soul, left a significant trust fund for you and your sister," Eva explained, her eyes watching me carefully, gauging my reaction. "You were supposed to gain full control of it on your 30th birthday. According to the documents I pulled from the county court, your mother, as the trustee, filed a motion to delay your access, citing concerns over emotional and mental instability. A motion she has successfully refiled every single year since, with supporting letters from your father and your sister." I stared at the monitor, at the audio waves of my mother's voice. She hadn't just covered for them, she had been actively, systematically, and financially sabotaging me for years. She had painted me as unstable to lawyers and banks, all to protect her favorite daughter and her sordid affair. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a lifelong conspiracy. It was a campaign to keep me down, to keep me dependent, to keep me manageable. My grief, my hurt, my sadness, it all evaporated in an instant, burned away by a fire of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a rage so cold and so clear that it felt like serenity. I looked up from the screen, my eyes meeting Eva's. She saw the shift in me. The victim was gone. "So," she said quietly, "what's the play, Thompson?" I took a deep breath. The storm inside me went still. It was the terrifying calm in the eye of a hurricane. I said, "I'm not just filing for divorce. I'm burning their whole world to the ground." Eva nodded slowly, a grim smile touching her lips. "For that," she said, pulling a business card from a locked drawer, "you're going to need more than a PI. You're going to need a shark." She slid the card across the table. It was heavy, made of black metal. It read, "Eva Ramirez, SQ, Ramirez and Associates, Financial Fraud and High Asset Litigation." I picked up the card. It felt heavy in my hand. It was the first weapon in my new arsenal. I said, "Set up a meeting. Tell her I'm coming with a mountain of evidence, and tell her I want to go all the way." The meeting with Eva Ramirez was like being ushered into a war room at the Pentagon. Her office was on the 50th floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky, offering a panoramic view of the city I no longer recognized. The space was minimalist, modern, and radiated a kind of ruthless efficiency. Eva herself was the human embodiment of her office, sharp, impeccably dressed in a steel gray suit with an intensity that made Marcus look like a laid-back surfer. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She said, "Marcus briefed me. Show me what you have." For the next hour, I laid out the entire sordid story, just as I had to Eva. The black notebook, the glossy 8x10 photos that felt like poison to the touch, the labyrinthine financial statements Eva had prepared, and finally the soul-crushing audio recording of my mother. Eva listened,
her steepled fingers pressed against her lips, her dark eyes never leaving mine. She didn't offer a word of sympathy. She offered strategy. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. They didn't just betray you, Miss Thompson. They've committed wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and a clear breach of fiduciary duties related to this trust fund. This isn't a divorce case anymore. This is a multi-front war. Our goal is not just to win, it's to achieve total, unconditional victory. Total, unconditional victory. The words resonated in the empty space where my heart used to be. I asked, "What's the play?" "The plan," she said, a slight, dangerous smile touching her lips, "is to let them think they've won the battle right before we win the war. You are going to become the woman they've always wanted you to be, compliant, broken, and apologetic. You will lull them into a state of supreme confidence. The bigger their confidence, Miss Thompson, the harder their fall." So I became an actor. It was the hardest role of my life. I went home and delivered a performance worthy of an Oscar. I found David in the kitchen and I apologized. I told him he was right, that my stress and paranoia had gotten the better of me, that I had been unfair, and that I was going to get help. The relief that washed over his face was so profound, it was nauseating. He hugged me, a triumphant, forgiving hug, and I had to fight every instinct in my body to not recoil in disgust. I could smell the faint scent of Vivian's perfume on him, the same scent that started it all. The next day, I called my mother. My hands were shaking as I dialed. I choked down the bile in my throat and told her I was sorry for being so dramatic, that I loved my sister and my husband and wanted to put it all behind us. She was ecstatic. "Oh, Sarah, I knew you'd see reason," she chirped, her giddy voice with victory. "That's my mature girl." I was their mature girl, their compliant, broken little project. They had no idea they were celebrating on the precipice of a volcano. Behind the scenes, my real team was moving at lightning speed. Eva's legal team was drafting the most comprehensive, ironclad legal filings I'd ever seen. Marcus was digging deeper, finding out that my Uncle Gregory, my father's lifelong business partner, who had always favored Vivian, had helped set up the offshore account to park some of the stolen money, implicating him as well. My cousin Jessica became my digital ghost, mapping out their entire digital lives, creating a timeline so precise it could pinpoint where they were every minute of every day they had lied to me. She even recovered deleted texts and emails. But the plan still felt incomplete. We could expose them, sue them, ruin them financially, but it didn't address the core of the rot. It didn't explain the why. Why the decades of preference for Vivian? Why my father's passive distance? It was a lifetime of feeling like an outsider in my own home, a feeling that went deeper than just a simple affair. That's when a wild, insane hunch, born from a lifetime of feeling less than, took root in my mind. "Eva," I said during one of our late-night strategy sessions in her office, surrounded by whiteboards covered in timelines and legal statutes, "I need something else, something personal. I need a DNA test." Eva raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You and your father?" "Yes." "That's a difficult request, Sarah," she said, her tone pragmatic. "You can't compel him to provide a sample without a court order, which we don't have grounds for yet anyway. It could be seen as a frivolous motion and hurt our credibility." "I know," I said, my voice low. "I'll have to get it myself." The opportunity came unexpectedly, a gift from the universe. My father called me. "Sarah, your mother and I are finally clearing out the garage this weekend. There are some old boxes of your things here from high school. You should come get them before they get tossed out with the rest of the junk." It was the perfect excuse. I drove to my childhood home, a place that now felt as alien to me as a foreign country. My father was in the garage, sweating in the summer heat, sorting through 20 years of accumulated junk. He seemed relieved to see me, to have a distraction. He handed me a cold bottle of beer. We made awkward small talk about sports, about my work. I watched him take a long swallow from his own beer bottle and then set it down on a cluttered workbench. We talked for another 10 minutes, the conversation strained and pointless.
When I left, I took the boxes of my old report cards and trophies, and I also palmed the beer bottle, wrapping it carefully in a dust rag from my trunk. It felt sordid, like something a criminal would do. But I was past caring about the niceties. I drove it straight to a private lab that Ava had recommended, one that specialized in discrete, court-admissible results. The wait for those results was 2 weeks of pure agony. In that time, the other side of my plan was coming together. My birthday was approaching. It was the perfect stage. I called my mother with my grand, magnanimous idea, a big family dinner, my treat, to celebrate my new perspective. But as we got closer to the date, something shifted. David started acting strangely. He was avoiding my calls. When I saw him at my parents' house to drop something off, he was jumpy, his eyes darting around suspiciously. He kept looking at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I realized my calm demeanor, my sudden compliance, was actually making him more nervous than my anger had. Then the bomb dropped. It wasn't my bomb, it was theirs. I came home from work on a Thursday, exactly 1 week before my scheduled birthday dinner, and they were all there. My mother, my father, Michael, Vivian, David, and, to my horror, Dr. Evans, my therapist friend. They were sitting in my living room, arranged like a tribunal. It was an ambush, an intervention. "Sarah, we're here because we love you," my mother began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, her hands clasped in her lap. "We're worried about you, sis," Michael chimed in, trying to look deeply concerned, but just looking shifty. Dr. Evans, the professional, took the lead. "Sarah, your family has noticed some erratic behavior lately." He held up a clipboard. "You've been withdrawn, but also making some unusual and significant financial decisions." My blood ran cold. He must have seen the $50,000 retainer payment to Ava. "We think it would be best for your own health and stability if you considered taking some time off, maybe a voluntary stay at a wellness facility to de-stress, to get yourself right." A wellness facility, a psychiatric hospital. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to have me committed. It was a preemptive strike. They were trying to legally declare me mentally incompetent. If they succeeded, any legal action I took, any accusation I made, would be dismissed as the ramblings of a disturbed mind. They would gain power of attorney. They would gain control of everything, my assets, my life. I was trapped. The walls of my own home were closing in on me. I looked at their faces one by one. My mother's cold, righteous determination, David's smug, feigned concern, Vivian's calculated pity, my brother's pursed lips of disapproval. They weren't a family, they were a wolf pack, and they were closing in for the kill. This was my dark night of the soul. For one terrifying, heart-stopping moment, I thought they might actually win. I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost brought me to my knees. It would be so easy to just give up, to let them take over, to let the darkness swallow me whole. But then I saw it, a flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph in David's eyes. He thought he had me. He thought he'd finally, definitively, won the lifelong competition I never even knew we were in. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not in a way that led to shouting or breaking things. It was a quiet snap, the snap of a steel trap closing. The rage and despair coalesced into something entirely else. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I looked around the room at each of them, my eyes full of manufactured confusion and hurt. I held up my hands in a gesture of surrender. I said, "You're right." My voice quiet, seemingly defeated. The tension in the room instantly eased. They leaned back in their chairs, a collective sigh of relief. They thought they had me. I haven't been myself. I know that. I've been under a lot of pressure. I looked at Dr. Evans, giving him the respect his ego craved. "You're right. I need help." My mother's shoulders sagged with relief. "Oh, Sarah," she beamed. I'll think about the wellness center," I stammered, playing my part to the hilt. "I will.
But first, my birthday dinner. It's in a week. It's all booked. Let's just have one last nice evening as a family to say goodbye for a while before I go. Please." It was the perfect move. It appealed to their sense of control, their love of dramatic, cinematic moments. They could see it as my formal public surrender, a final validation of their actions. My mother smiled, a genuine, relieved smile this time, the smile of a general accepting the sword of her vanquished enemy. "Of course, dear, of course. One last nice dinner." They left soon after, high on their victory. I stood alone in the center of my living room, the silence ringing in my ears. They thought they had put me in a cage. They had no idea they had just handed me the key, unlocked the door, and pointed me toward the exit. The birthday dinner wasn't going to be a surrender. It was going to be a slaughter. And I had one more ace to play. The results from the DNA lab were due in 2 days. The night of the dinner, I dressed for war. Black suit, crisp white shirt, blood red tie. A power tie. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the haunted, uncertain woman from a few months ago. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were cold, clear, and relentlessly focused. She was a general on the morning of a battle she had already meticulously planned and knew with absolute certainty she was going to win. I arrived at the restaurant a full hour early. I did a final quiet walkthrough with the manager, a man whose complete loyalty and discretion I had secured with an envelope of cash so thick it felt like a paperback. I confirmed the seating arrangement, a horseshoe shape, with me at the head. I made sure Marcus, who was posing as a solo diner engrossed in a book at a nearby table, had a clear line of sight and was recording audio on his phone. And I gave a final subtle nod to Ava Ramirez, who was sitting elegantly at the bar, nursing a club soda. She looked for all the world like my stunning, successful new date, the perfect camouflage. My family arrived in a wave of smug self-satisfaction. They were radiating victory. They greeted me with warm, condescending hugs and deeply concerned smiles. "You're looking so much better, Sarah," my mother said, patting my cheek as if I were a child. "There's a little color in your face. See? Making the right decision does wonders."
We sat down. The small talk was excruciating, a masterclass in denial. They talked about the weather, about Michael's new tech gadget, about the stock market, about David's upcoming sure thing promotion. They talked about everything and anything except the truth, the giant, rotting elephant in the room. I let them. I played my part, nodding and smiling, a lamb being led to a feast, unaware I was the one who would sharpen the knives. After the main course plates were cleared, David, as the golden boy and de facto master of ceremonies, stood up. He topped his wine glass with a fork, a triumphant ringing sound. This was it, the opening act of their final victory lap, the public celebration of my surrender. "I'd like to make a toast," he began, that $1 million smile firmly in place. "To my wife, Sarah. She's been through a lot lately. We've all been worried sick about her, but she's a woman of incredible grace, and she's shown us all what true strength and forgiveness really look like. She's choosing to heal, and we're so proud. So here's to moving forward, to family." "To family," they all murmured, a chorus of hypocrites raising their glasses. I let the moment hang in the air, letting their self-congratulation curdle. Then I slowly, deliberately tapped my own water glass with my fork. The clear ringing sound was sharp, clean, and cut through the murmurs like a scalpel. All eyes, curious and a little annoyed at my interruption, turned to me. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice perfectly calm and even. "That was a beautiful speech, and it's true, I have been through a lot. And I've been doing a lot of thinking since our little intervention last week." I saw Dr. Evans shift uncomfortably in his seat, his professional smile wavering. "I've realized you were all right," I continued, letting my eyes drift slowly from my mother to my father to Michael to Vivian and finally landing back on David with the weight of a physical blow. My problem was that I was trying to solve a complex legal and financial conspiracy with my emotions,
And as you've also helpfully pointed out, for my entire life, my emotions are not my strong suit. So I hired better tools. On that cue, Ava Ramirez stood up from the bar. She picked up her portfolio and walked to my table. Her arrival was a silent, graceful bomb that sucked the air out of the room. I believe you all know who I am from the intervention I was unfortunately not invited to, she said, her voice a whip crack in the sudden dead silence. I'm Ava Ramirez, Sarah Thompson's attorney. She placed her leather portfolio on the table, and from it she produced a set of 5 thick, professionally spiral-bound dossiers. The covers were plain black. She slid one in front of each key player: David, Vivian, Eleanor, Richard, and Michael. "What the hell is this?" David sputtered, his smile gone, replaced by a confused, belligerent scowl. "That," I said, standing up to my full height, feeling powerful for the first time in years, "is the truth, in a format you can't dismiss as me being paranoid or emotional." David's hands were trembling as he opened his dossier. The first page was a full-color, high-resolution, 8x10 photo of him and Vivian kissing passionately in the Napa Hotel elevator. His hand was firmly cupping her lower back, pulling her close, their lips intertwined. He made a small, strangled sound and slammed it shut as if the paper had burned his fingers. Vivian, ever the fighter, ripped hers open. She saw the same photos, followed by copies of her American Express statements with charges the boutique hotel, the expensive dinners, the diamond necklace from Tiffany's he bought her, all highlighted in yellow. Then came the bank records from the home equity line of credit showing $62,000 flowing from my account to hers. Michael opened his to find page after page of transcripts of his text messages which Jessica had recovered, messages where he actively coordinated the gaslighting campaign with his mother. "Just keep telling her she's stressed and overworked. She'll believe it if we all say it. We just need to manage her through this," one of his texts read. My mother, Eleanor, stared at hers in horror. Her dossier contained the complete financial audit of the home equity line of credit, showing her as a co-signer who had approved the withdrawals. And on the second page, a full verbatim transcript of the audio recording Ava had captured, the one where she talked about keeping me compliant and illegally hiding my inheritance, the trust fund. "This is illegal," my mother whispered, her face ashen, looking at me with pure hatred. "You can't record me." "It was a legal wiretap, Eleanor, authorized by a judge in relation to a financial fraud investigation. Perfectly admissible," Ava chimed in, her voice cool and factual. My father, Richard, was the only one who hadn't opened his. He was just staring at me, his face a mask of confusion and fear. He decided to play his last card, the card of paternal authority. "Sarah, this has gone too far," he said, his voice trying for a commanding tone, but coming out weak and reedy. "I am your father, and I am telling you to stop this right now. This is not how a family behaves." I held his gaze. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. This was it, the real climax, the checkmate move, the secret I had held close for 2 long, agonizing weeks. "That's the thing, Richard. That's the final piece of the puzzle I needed to solve, the reason for all of this." I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and pulled out a single sealed envelope. I slid it across the white tablecloth to him. It stopped right in front of his wine glass. He tore it open with fumbling, clumsy fingers. It was the official, notarized report from the DNA lab. He read the conclusion, his eyes scanning the damning words. Based on the analysis of the genetic markers, the probability of Richard Thompson being the biological father of Sarah Thompson is 0%. He dropped the paper as if it were on fire. It fluttered to the floor. The entire table fell into a profound, bottomless, nuclear silence. Judge Holloway, my godfather, who was sitting at the end of the table as a guest of honor, suddenly looked extremely ill. The uncanny family resemblance between me and him, something people had commented on as a joke for years, was suddenly cast in a horrifying new light. My mother looked from the paper to me to Judge Holloway, and a silent, terrible understanding passed between them. Her face, if possible, grew even whiter. The conspiracy wasn't just about an affair.
It was about a lie that had been rotting at the very core of our family for 34 years. Her obsessive, suffocating protection of Vivian, her true daughter, the legitimate heir, my father's lifelong passive distance. It all made a sick, twisted kind of sense. "Happy birthday to me," I said quietly into the void. The chaos that followed was predictable, but no less satisfying. David was openly sobbing. Vivian was on her feet yelling about lawsuits and lies. My mother was just staring, catatonic, her world dismantled before her eyes. Ava Ramirez chose that moment to step forward again, the calm center of the hurricane. She placed her heavy metal business card gently in front of David. "Mr. David Miller," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a diamond drill. "My client has already filed a comprehensive 200-page report with the state's Financial Crimes Division based on the evidence contained in that dossier. The same goes for the fraudulent management of the trust fund. You should expect to hear from their investigators. I strongly suggest you find competent legal counsel. You're going to need it."
Then she turned her cool gaze to Vivian. "And Miss Vivian Thompson, we will be filing for divorce first thing in the morning on grounds of adultery and financial fraud. We will be petitioning for a full and immediate dissolution of all marital assets. And given the egregious circumstances, we are extremely confident that Miss Thompson will retain the house and all other significant marital property." They were broken. All of them. They had come to this dinner for a celebration of their power over me, and I had turned the tables so completely, so utterly, that they would never, ever recover. The truth hadn't just set me free. It had annihilated their world, and it was a beautiful sight to behold. The rest of the dinner was a blur of controlled demolition. My family, or the collection of people I had once called my family, didn't leave in a dramatic table-flipping storm out. They just crumbled. They deflated like punctured balloons, the hot air of their arrogance and self-righteousness hissing out into the cold, sterile air of the private dining room. The other patrons in the main restaurant area were probably wondering what kind of silent, brutal drama was unfolding behind our closed doors. David was the first to try and muster a defense, but his punches were weak and clumsy, like a drunk trying to start a fight. He stood up, knocking his chair over with a clatter that seemed deafeningly loud in the tense room. His face was blotchy and red, a mixture of rage and sheer panic. "You can't do this, Sarah. This is insane. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. This is slander. This is lies." Eva, who was now calmly packing the remaining dossiers back into her portfolio, didn't even bother to look up at him. "I certainly hope so," she said, her voice dry and bored. "It will make serving him the subpoena that much easier. Please have him call my office to arrange a time. We're very accommodating." David just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He was a chess player who had just realized his opponent had been playing with a tank. He had no more moves. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a moment, as if expecting the old Sarah, the one he could manipulate, to step in and call it all off. I just stared back at him, my face a blank wall. He got nothing from me. Defeated, he grabbed his coat and practically ran out of the restaurant, a coward to the very end. Vivian was next. The performative tears had long since dried on her face, leaving behind a mask of desperate, ugly fury. "You're a monster, Sarah," she whispered across the table, her voice trembling with rage. "A cruel, vindictive, evil monster. I hope you're happy." Happy isn't the word, Vivian. Vindicated is closer. But honestly, I just feel done. You and I have nothing more to say to each other, ever. You'll be hearing from Eva from now on. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The finality in my tone, the absolute lack of any remaining emotion for her, was more devastating than any shouting match could have been. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. She gathered her purse, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, and walked away, not looking back. That left the architects of my lifelong misery, my mother, Eleanor, and the man I had called my father for 34 years, Richard. Eleanor was still frozen,
her eyes locked on the DNA report that lay on the floor by Richard's chair. She seemed to have aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Her carefully constructed mask of the perfect, caring matriarch had been shattered, and the creature underneath was small, petty, and terrified. Judge Holloway, my real biological father, had quietly excused himself moments earlier, mumbling something about an urgent call, leaving a significant, unsipped glass of very expensive scotch behind. A quiet admission of guilt. Richard finally looked at me. There was no anger left in his eyes, just a vast, hollow, and desolate emptiness. He had been a victim in this too, in a way, a cuckold who had raised another man's daughter, living a lie for over 30 decades, too weak or too afraid to ever confront it. But his weakness, his passive refusal to ever stand up for me, his willingness to be a silent partner in my mother's gaslighting had made him complicit. His sin was one of omission, and it was just as damning. He said, "Sarah, I swear to God, I didn't know." I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time. "Didn't you?" I asked, quietly. Or was it just easier to not look too closely? Was it just easier to let me be the difficult one? He had no answer. He couldn't meet my gaze. He slowly pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. He stood up, a stooped, broken man, and walked out of my life without another word. I watched him go, and I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not sadness. Just the quiet, clean closing of a very long, very painful chapter. Now it was just my mother and I, with Eva standing by like a silent sentinel. "All of it?" Nelenor finally whispered, her voice a ghost. Her eyes were unfocused, looking at something far away. All of it was to protect her, because she was Richard's. She was the legitimate one, the true heir. The raw, ugly truth of it hung in the air between us. In her twisted, narcissistic mind, my entire existence was a threat to the legitimacy of her golden child. My successes were an annoyance, my pans were a distraction, and my very presence was an inconvenient reminder of her own betrayal. "And now you have nothing left to protect," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I stood up and put my napkin on the table. The meal was over. I turned to leave, but then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Jessica, who had slipped out moments earlier. I opened it. It was short and brutally to the point. By the way, about Vivian's boutique, the bank was happy to offload her defaulted business loan to an interested party. I bought the debt this afternoon for pennies on the dollar. I own her now. Consider it handled. A small, cold smile touched my lips. It was the final strategic blow. The boutique, the symbol of her affair, the business funded by my stolen money, was now in the hands of my closest, most ruthless ally. She hadn't just lost a husband, a home, and her reputation. She had lost her dream, and she was now massively indebted to the one person in the world who would show her absolutely no mercy. I looked back at my mother one last time. She was just a small, broken woman sitting alone at a large, empty table, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. She looked pathetic. I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool night air, Eva by my side. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt quiet. The storm had passed. The noise in my head, the constant chatter of doubt and hurt and anger that had been my companion for so long, was finally silent. And for the first time in my life, I was standing in the silence that followed, completely and utterly on my own. And I was okay with that. The war was over. Now the rebuilding could begin. A year went by. A year is both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. Time has a funny way of sanding down the sharp edges of trauma. It doesn't erase the scars, but it can change the way you carry them. They become a part of your topography, a map of where you've been, not a cage that holds you captive. The first few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Depositions, motions, affidavits, discoveries. It was a sterile, paper-based war, and I was immensely grateful to have Eva Ramirez as my general. She was a marvel of efficiency and contained aggression. I delegated the fight to her, making a conscious choice to focus my own energy not on tearing down the remnants of the old, but on building the foundations of the new. The divorce was finalized with brutal speed. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence, David's legal team advised him not to fight. He took a small court-mandated settlement that Eva offered, enough to keep him from being destitute, but a tiny fraction of the fortune he had expected. And he disappeared. I heard through the grapevine he'd moved back to his hometown in Ohio, a place he always swore he'd never return to. Vivian's trendy boutique was foreclosed on by Jessica, who then sold the assets and donated the profits to a shelter for victims of domestic abuse, a final poetic piece of justice. Vivian and my mother were a different, messier story. They were being investigated by the state for financial crimes. Their case dragged on, bogged down in expensive legal maneuvers. But the outcome was never in doubt. Vivian was fired from her high-paying job at the bank, blacklisted from the financial industry she loved. They had to sell the big, beautiful family house I grew up in to pay their mounting legal bills. Their perfect world, built on my silent suffering, had been completely and irrevocably shattered.
As for me, I sold the house I had shared with David as quickly as possible. It was tainted. Every room held a ghost. Every corner, a memory of a lie. I put my essential belongings in storage and leased a simple, modern apartment downtown with a great view of the city skyline. For a while, I just needed anonymity. I needed to be a woman without a past. I poured myself into two things: my work, where the logic of numbers and markets was a comforting balm, and therapy, with a professional who wasn't a family friend with a hidden agenda. I found a tough, no-nonsense therapist in her 60s who helped me learn to untangle the 34 years of carefully woven lies from the actual truth of who I was. It was painstaking work, like separating threads in a giant knotted mess. The biggest truth I uncovered was that I still felt a deep, primal connection to the idea of family, just not the one I was born into. The only person from that life I still spoke to was my cousin Jessica. She had been the first one to reach out, the first crack of light in my dark prison of gaslighting. She had chosen loyalty to the truth over loyalty to the toxic family narrative. And that took a kind of courage I would always admire. We met for coffee one sunny Saturday about a year after the infamous birthday dinner. She looked well, relaxed, free from the oppressive weight of the family secrets. "So, I heard something interesting through the office rumor mill," she said, stirring her latte with a little smile. "Uncle Gregory is trying to sell the lake house." The lake house? The one place from my childhood that held genuinely, purely happy memories? Summer spent learning to fish with my grandfather, cool nights by a bonfire. The place that was supposed to be mine someday. A promise made to me by my grandmother long before I knew the promises of my family were written in disappearing ink. "He's handling the sale for your mom and Richard," she continued, taking a sip of her coffee. "Richard moved out, by the way, lives in a sad little condo across town. I heard he can't even look at Eleanor anymore. The great love story is officially over." I took a sip of my own coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. "He can't sell it," I said simply. Jessica looked confused. "Why not? The listing just went up this week. It's all over the local real estate sites." "Because," I said, leaning forward, the smile turning into a grin, "I bought it last month through a blind shell corporation set up by Eva's firm. We made them an all-cash offer they couldn't refuse, well above asking price with a quick close. They have no idea who the buyer is. The deal officially closed on Tuesday. He's trying to sell a property that already belongs to me." Jessica's jaw dropped, a moment of stunned silence, and then she broke into a huge, delighted grin.
"You are scary sometimes, Sarah Thompson, in the best possible way. I'm just tired of being polite, and I decided it was time to reclaim my own legacy on my own terms. That evening, I drove the 2 hours up to the lake house. It was mine. The key felt solid and real in my hand. It felt like victory. I walked through the quiet, dusty rooms, memories echoing in the empty spaces, but they weren't painful anymore. They were just history, my history, a past I could now look at without letting it define my future. I walked out onto the large back deck, the wooden planks groaning familiarly under my feet. The sun was setting over the still water, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. It was peaceful. It was mine. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart gave a little jolt of alarm, a phantom limb of my old anxiety. I opened it. "Sarah, it's David. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, and I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I was lost and insecure, and I just wanted to feel loved. I ended up destroying everything good in my life to get it. I'm in therapy now. I hope one day you can find peace." I read the message once. I considered the words. Maybe he was sorry. Maybe he wasn't. It didn't matter anymore. His apology was for him, not for me. My peace was not dependent on his remorse. Without a second thought, I deleted the message and blocked the number. I turned my phone off and sat down on one of the old Adirondack chairs facing the sunset. The air was cool and clean. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. I was finally, truly home. The lake house became my sanctuary, my fortress of solitude. It was where I untangled the final knots of my old life and began weaving the new one. The legal battles eventually wound down to their inevitable conclusions. To avoid a public, humiliating trial, David and my mother pleaded guilty to lesser charges of financial mismanagement. They received hefty fines that wiped out the last of their savings and 5 years of strict probation. Their public and private humiliation was complete. I never saw or spoke to any of them again. They were ghosts, figures from a past life that no longer concerned me. Judge Holloway had quietly taken an early retirement shortly after the dinner, citing health reasons, and moved to Florida. A quiet, self-imposed exile to avoid the scandal that would have destroyed his career. The story faded, as all stories eventually do, becoming just another piece of local gossip. I didn't become a crusader for the wronged. I didn't start a podcast or write a tell-all book. My story was mine. And the peace I found in reclaiming it for myself was not in broadcasting it to the world. My victory wasn't in public vindication. It was in private, quiet peace. It was in the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding genuine connections. Marcus and his family came up to the lake house often. We'd grill burgers on the deck, take his old ski boat out on the water. His kids' laughter filled the space, a joyous, cleansing sound that chased away the last of the old ghosts. Jessica became the sister I never truly had. We'd spend holidays there, Thanksgiving, the 4th of July, creating new, healthier traditions. We were a different kind of family, one built on trust, respect, and conscious choice. One crisp autumn evening, I was sitting on the deck, a warm cup of coffee in my hands, watching the brilliant red and yellow leaves fall from the maple trees. Marcus was with me, sitting in the chair next to me. We were just enjoying the comfortable silence that only old friends can share. My phone buzzed on the small table between us. It was an email from Eva's office, a final closing document on one of the tangential financial cases, a last minor loose end finally being tied up. That email would have sent a jolt of adrenaline or anger through me. It would have consumed my thoughts for the rest of the night. It would have stolen my peace. Now I glanced at the subject line, saw the word finalized, and archived the email without even opening it. I set the phone face down on the table. It could wait for tomorrow, or the day after, or never. It didn't matter. It no longer had any power over me. "You know," I said, my voice quiet, looking out at the calm, dark water that reflected the deep blue of the twilight sky. "They spent their whole lives chasing status,
protecting a legacy that was built on a lie. They thought that was wealth. They thought that was what mattered. They were wrong. In the end, the greatest wealth is peace. He nodded, a slow, understanding smile on his own face. He raised his coffee mug in a silent toast. To peace, my friend. I raised my mug back to him. To peace. Peace, a word that felt like a luxury after all I'd been through. I closed my eyes, feeling the cool breeze from the lake carrying the scent of damp leaves and water. My old family was shattered, the secrets laid bare, and I had risen from my own ashes. But was this truly the end, or merely a new beginning with scars etched deep and questions still lingering in the quiet lake night? Would those who hurt me ever truly find their own peace, or would they remain trapped in the web of lies they'd spun? And I who had weathered the storm, would this peace endure, or would the ghosts of the past reappear, whispering secrets I had yet to uncover? Sometimes truth unveiled is just the beginning of bigger mysteries. And tonight, under the hazy moonlight, I felt at peace, but also a vague sense of lingering ambiguity, as if my story still had many unread pages.